Hi, we're talking about spondylolithesis today. We've been talking during the week or last week about different back conditions, so things like discs and what that means for your back, and spondylosis, what that means for your back. Two of the biggies that we sort of haven't touched on is spondylitis to an inflammatory component in the spine. So things like ankylosing spondylitis, it's a specific condition. It tends to be sort of autoimmune reliant as well. And it basically refers to an inflammatory process. So when you hear something like a spondylitis or sacroiliitis, it's generally an inflammatory component that's going on. Obviously something that we wouldn't want to aggravate or irritate when it's in that acute inflammatory process. And that tends to be a little bit more of a medical management in that initial stages. Obviously we do need physio to help, but it can be quite painful, and you're looking at trying to settle down the inflammation. And obviously in the cases like an ankylosing spondylitis that's been diagnosed, we're looking at slowing the progressive changes in the spine and maintaining movement and function, rather than allowing the person to get a little bit more stiff, because obviously as you get inflammation you tend not to move, and when you don't move that inflammation can cause you to become a little bit stiffer and you gradually lose movement. So the itises, so that sort of spondylitis, sacroiliitis, we're not really going to discuss today. Today we're looking at something called spondylolithesis. It's one of those really big words, and it refers to a specific issue generally in the lower back, so in your lumbar spine. And what is actually happening, so if you look at turn this around so you may see it, you can see the vertebral bodies as you're looking at the picture from the front, as you're looking at a back from the back. These are the sticky out bits which your spinous processes. And what actually happens with a spondylolithesis is that one of the vertebral bodies shifts forward relative to the other. Okay, spondylolithesis is basically graded. So what we're looking is you have a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 3, a grade 4, and all that refers to is how far forward that shift in that vertebral body has happened. So typically what we're looking at is a grade 1 is mild. There might be a little bit of movement going all the way up to quite a big shift, which would actually cause a pars fracture, which is basically where the vertebra here has shifted so far forward that it's caused a fracture in the actual back end structures. So not so much in the vertebral body bit, but in the structures that then support that against the spine. Obviously quite serious if it goes to that extent, but in a spondylolisthesis situation, in a mild one, so grade 1, grade 2, you're looking at a mild shift forward. And there's certain things that we do with these clients and you should do with these clients, and there's certain things you definitely do not want to do with these clients. So if you're looking at the vertebral body here, if it's had a shunt forward, so what's happening is the actual vertebra is shunting forwards. The obvious thing is to try and prevent that. So what we're looking at is making the abs stronger so that it supports it. Once you've got that shift, it's not going to change. So, once you've got that little bit of movement forward and you've got what we call a spondylolisthesis, the bony change has happened. You've had that shift forward. The management is to manage it and not let it get worse. So what we want to do is use the abs to pull back in. So if you can imagine this bit here has shunted forward, say 2 mils, okay, that would be a grade 1. What we're looking at is that we keep that there, we don't let it go to 5 mils or 10 mils. So you want the abs to support that and bring it back, okay. Typically what is going to make somebody with a spondylolisthesis worse is extension. Okay, so if I just stand up, if I have my back in that position here, okay, and that vertebra is shifting forwards, so this vertebra here is doing that, I want to be doing something with my abs to pull it backwards. What I don't want to be doing is a heap of extension, which then pushes it forwards. Okay, so the big thing that we avoid is extension, because as we extend, it encourages that movement there. What we do want to do is encourage core work to bring that back. Okay, so So that's the basic premise behind a spondylolisthesis. And definitely if you are grade 1, grade 2, and it's sort of mild, you can still obviously get pain and your spondy can still cause you pain. When you sort of head into grade 3, grade 4, that's when they might start thinking about, is this bad enough? Is it causing problems? Is it causing neural symptoms? Is it causing an issue around your spinal cord where you actually might then need to have some surgery done? So this is what we're looking at in terms of the body, and this is what we're looking at in terms of the back. How do you then manage clients like these? So the biggie with the spondylolisthesis is that it's a shift in a vertebra forward relative to the other vertebra, and you might at the back feel that there's a little bit of a step in with that. Typically clients tend to be quite sore at night. If they're lying on their back, they can be a little bit sore, so typically it's a little bit of a pain at night. But any pain at night you need to get investigated, because you don't want pain at night. With your spondylolisthesis, you want to discourage things that could make it worse and make it more problematic with it, which is extensions. So we would definitely block things into extension. And an easy way to do that is, if people do like to be belly sleepers, is that instead of them lying on their belly that way where their spine can sink, you actually prop them up and have a couple of pillows. So you can see if there's some pillows under the belly, it actually forces the spine upwards a little bit. And that tends to be a way, if you have people that need to exercise, they actually will learn to, or they would have been advised by their physio to support their bellies, or have a couple of towels rolled up just to flatten their spine. So a typical one is if somebody is doing some leg work into extension, you can see if they're doing it badly and lifting their leg up, they'll do that. You might actually have them in that position and doing leg work that way, so that they don't have the chance to extend at that bit of their spine at all, rather than having them where they're doing that. You take that component away and do leg extensions that way, if that makes sense. So there are workarounds. Do we extend these clients? Yes, as a physio I would. Would I tell you to? No. I know what I'm doing, hopefully. So I would extend them from a level higher, or I would extend them from below, and I would make sure that that level that was compromised was actually kept still. Would I advise them to go and do their own extensions? Absolutely no way. But it's different ideas as well. But the general rule of thumb is, if you have a spondylolisthesis, your movement is forward. So it's generally one of the vertebrae move forward. And the only real way to tell is, we can generally have a good idea. We'll have a feel around, because we are obviously assessing people, and we'll have a good idea. Yeah, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It feels like there's a bit of a dip. If we do what we call a shear test, we'll go, yeah, that's moving a little bit more than it should do. Maybe just go and get it looked at, maybe get an x-ray, and it's the x-ray that will give you that definitive diagnosis. Sometimes people can have a retrolithesis, which is, instead of it shifting forwards, it's actually shifted backwards. So again, very important to know what you're doing, because your management of that will be quite different to your management of that. Your management of somebody with a spondylolisthesis is going to be quite different to your management of somebody with a disc problem. With a disc problem, we would want to extend them. With a spondylolisthesis, we don't want to extend them. So going with the blanket, I've got a back pain, I know what to do, doesn't really work if people have specifics that they do know about. So hopefully that sort of cleared up a little bit about what spondylolisthesis is. It is a shift of the vertebra, a little tiny sort of grade 1, grade 2 is quite manageable. It can't get better, so we can't drag the vertebra backwards. What we do is we're trying to prevent it from shifting forward more, and we do that by stopping the provocative things that potentially can make it worse, and giving a lot more abdominal and core control support to make it have support that way, so it feels like it's not going to shift forward more. And it might also include some work into some flexion, because that can be a little bit of a relieving issue. And the issue with something like a spondylolisthesis is whether it's actually causing some stenosis. So that's another word that people will find, is that there's some spinal stenosis, which basically means there's compromise around the outlets of the nerve. The nerves are getting compromised and compressed, and something like flexion can improve that. If it's an extension where the compression is and the area of space is small, we'll go into flexion to open up those areas up. But stenosis, again, can be common with people with spondylolisthesis, but also a common issue if you have quite a lot of poor degenerative changes in your spine and the area around the foramen where the nerve tracks out is reduced and compromised. Okay, so spondies, or spondylolisthesis rather, minimal extension and working like crazy to maintain a core posture so that you're trying to improve the support at the front and sort of improve the TA or transversus muscles and the core muscles to support the spine, rather than to allow that vertebral body to shift forward a little bit more. Hopefully that made sense. And yeah, if you do have a spondylolisthesis and you're aware of it, please get help with it. If you haven't seen somebody specifically, it's one of those things that once it's there, we can't change it. But what we do need to do is actively be proactive about stopping it getting worse.